"He won't make it. Transfer everything," my brother said while I was unconscious on life support. My name is Greg Talbot. I'm 51 years old, managing partner at Talbot and Green Holdings here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'd been building commercial real estate deals and structuring private lending arrangements for 24 years. The kind of work that requires you to think 3 moves ahead and never show your cards until the game is over. What Ryan and Eric didn't know while they were dividing up my life's work over my hospital bed was that I'd already been thinking 4 moves ahead for months. The whole thing started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was reviewing zoning applications for a mixed-use development. We were pushing through city council when this stabbing pain hit my abdomen like someone had driven a railroad spike through my gut. I'd felt off for a few days, figured it was stress from the Eastwood Commons project that had been consuming my life for the better part of 6 months. At 51, you learn to push through discomfort. That's what men do. We don't complain, we don't make excuses, we just handle business until our bodies force us to stop. By the time I made it to Presbyterian Medical Center, the appendix had already burst. What should have been a routine surgery turned into a nightmare of complications. Peritonitis, they called it. Infection spreading through my abdominal cavity like wildfire. I went under the knife conscious and confident, expecting to be back in the office by Friday. Instead, I spent the next 11 days in an induced coma while machines kept me breathing and my body fought for its life. During those 11 days, while I was floating somewhere between consciousness and the void, my younger brother Ryan and my business partner of 15 years, Eric Green, decided I wasn't coming back. They made that decision on day 3, according to what I learned later. Day 3, not even a week into the fight for my life, and the 2 men I trusted most in this world were already measuring my coffin. Let me tell you about Ryan first, because family betrayal cuts deeper than any business deal gone wrong. Ryan is 46, 5 years younger than me, and I'd been looking out for him since our father walked out when I was 16 and he was 11. Our mother worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed, and I stepped into that big brother role like it was my calling. When Ryan struggled with addiction in his 20s, I was the one who paid for rehab. When he needed a fresh start, I was the one who brought him into the business, gave him the head of sales position, and a minor stake in the company. Not because he'd earned it, but because he was family, and family takes care of family. That's what I believed then. Eric Green was different. Eric and I built Talbot and Green Holdings from nothing back in 1999. We were college roommates at UNC Charlotte, both studying business, both dreaming of something bigger than working for someone else's vision. Eric handled the numbers, I handled the deals. He was methodical where I was intuitive, cautious where I was willing to take calculated risks. We complemented each other perfectly for over 2 decades. Eric owned 49% of the company. I owned 51%. That 2% difference meant I had final say on major decisions, but we'd never needed to use it. We talked through everything, made decisions together, built something solid and profitable that employed 23 people and generated consistent 7-figure revenue. The business we'd built specialized in commercial real estate development and private lending. We'd find undervalued properties, secure financing, navigate the zoning and permitting process, then either develop them ourselves or partner with established developers who needed our expertise and capital. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was profitable and honest. We developed strip malls, office complexes, mixed-use residential projects. Our private lending division helped smaller developers who couldn't get traditional bank financing, but had solid projects and good track records. 3 months before my hospitalization, I'd made what turned out to be the most important business decision of my life. I'd restructured our company's trust and asset protection framework. It wasn't because I suspected betrayal from Ryan or Eric. It was because I'd gotten spooked by a situation with one of our clients, a developer named Marcus Webb, who'd been sued by his ex-wife's attorney for fraudulent transfer of assets during their divorce. The case had gotten ugly, and watching Marcus lose everything he'd built because he hadn't properly protected his business interests was a wake-up call. I'd hired Monica Vale, one of Charlotte's top estate planning attorneys, to audit our corporate structure and implement bulletproof asset protection protocols. Monica was thorough, experienced, and expensive. She'd restructured our holdings through a Series LLC framework nested within an irrevocable trust domiciled in Delaware, where business courts understand complex asset protection strategies. The trust required dual consent for any major asset liquidation or ownership transfer, but more importantly, it included automatic reversion clauses that voided unauthorized transactions within 72 hours of detection. She'd also updated our banking controls to require biometric authentication for any transactions over $50,000, instituted mandatory waiting periods with automatic legal review triggers, and established a sophisticated monitoring system with David Chen's forensic accounting firm that used algorithmic analysis to detect unusual asset movements in real time. The monitoring system tracked not just transaction amounts, but also timing patterns, authorization sequences, and deviation from established operational protocols. Monica had also insisted on updating our emergency medical directives and power of attorney documents. She'd seen too many business partnerships destroyed by family members making financial decisions during medical crises. I designated my ex-wife Charlotte as my medical power of attorney, not because we were close, but because she was the most level-headed person I knew and had no financial interest in the business. Ryan and Eric were specifically excluded from any medical or financial decision-making authority. At the time, it seemed like standard legal housekeeping. Later, it saved everything. The emergency contact protocols Monica established meant that any attempt to liquidate company assets during my incapacitation would trigger automatic legal review and potential intervention. She'd retained a forensic accountant named David Chen, who specialized in corporate fraud investigation. David's firm had access to our banking records and was authorized to file emergency injunctions if they detected unauthorized asset transfers. None of this was public knowledge. Eric knew we'd done some legal restructuring, but I hadn't shared the details of the trust setup or the monitoring systems. Ryan knew even less. As head of sales, he had access to client information and commission structures, but no insight into our corporate governance or asset protection strategies. That compartmentalization of information wasn't intentional deception. It was just good business practice. You don't share sensitive operational details with employees who don't need them to do their jobs, even if one of those employees happens to be your brother. While I was unconscious, fighting for my life in the ICU, Ryan and Eric were having conversations in the hospital waiting room that would change all our lives forever. I learned the details later through depositions and witness statements, but the basic facts are simple and devastating. On day 3 of my coma, when the doctors were still uncertain about my prognosis, Ryan looked at Eric and said, "He won't make it. Transfer everything." Eric should have told him to shut up and wait. Eric should have remembered the legal restructuring we'd done. Eric should have acted like the fiduciary partner he was supposed to be. Instead, he listened to my brother's panic and greed and started making calls. They began with the Eastwood Commons project, our biggest active development. Eric contacted our construction partner and authorized transfer of our management rights to a temporary LLC Ryan had incorporated that week. They liquidated 2 smaller properties using an emergency clause that I'd never signed, forging my signature on documents dated before my surgery. Eric told our staff that I'd signed off on these transfers pre-op as a precautionary measure, which was a complete fabrication. Ryan was given temporary control of the sales division and began reaching out to our lending clients, suggesting they might want to restructure their loans given the uncertainty about my condition. The implication was clear. If I died, they might have problems with loan continuity, so they should consider moving their business to the new entity Ryan was establishing. What they didn't know was that every one of these transactions was being monitored in real time by David Chen's forensic accounting team using proprietary software that tracked not just transaction amounts, but behavioral patterns, authorization sequences, and timing anomalies. David's system had been customized specifically for our corporate structure, with automated alerts triggered by any deviation from established operational protocols. When Ryan and Eric attempted their unauthorized transfers, the system immediately flagged multiple red flags: transactions occurring outside normal business hours, authorization attempts using outdated security protocols, and most critically, asset movements that violated the dual consent requirements embedded in our trust structure. The forensic analysis also revealed that Ryan had been conducting preliminary research on asset liquidation procedures for 3 weeks before my hospitalization, suggesting premeditation rather than panic-driven decision-making. David's team had archived email communications, phone logs, and even browser history that showed systematic planning for what they would later claim was an emergency response to my medical crisis. Monica received notification of the suspicious activity while I was still unconscious. She immediately contacted Charlotte, my medical power of attorney, who confirmed that no asset transfers had been authorized by me or by her as my designated decision-maker. Monica then initiated an emergency legal review of all recent corporate transactions. By day 7 of my coma, while Ryan and Eric were still operating under the assumption that they were successfully consolidating control of the business, Monica had assembled a complete case file documenting corporate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and unauthorized asset transfers. She'd prepared preliminary injunction paperwork and was ready to file the moment I regained consciousness. I woke up on day 11. The doctor said it was touch and go for a while, that the infection had been more serious than they'd initially realized, but my body had fought back stronger than expected. The first thing I remember was the taste of the breathing tube being removed, then Charlotte's face looking down at me with relief and something else. Anger, maybe, or determination. She was holding a manila folder. "Greg," she said quietly, "there are some things you need to know about what happened while you were out." She handed me the folder. Inside were photocopies of documents, bank statements, corporate filings, all the evidence of what Ryan and Eric had been doing while they thought I was dying. I read through everything slowly, my mind still foggy from the medications but getting clearer with each page. The unauthorized transfers, the forged signatures, the temporary LLC, the client outreach suggesting my demise, the whole ugly picture of opportunistic betrayal while I was fighting for my life. I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not anger, exactly. Not even disappointment. Something colder and more focused. I was looking at documentary evidence that the 2 people I'd trusted most in the world had written me off and started dividing up my life's work before my body was even cold. They hadn't waited to see if I'd recover. They hadn't honored the legal structures we'd put in place. They just assumed I was finished and moved to benefit from my downfall. "What do you want to do?" Charlotte asked. I closed the folder and looked at her. "Nothing," I said. "Not yet." I spent the next 6 weeks recovering quietly at home. I didn't contact the office. I didn't return calls from Ryan or Eric. I let them think I was still too weak to focus on business. During those 6 weeks, Monica and David Chen were building an airtight case for corporate fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. They documented every unauthorized transaction, every forged signature, every client conversation that had occurred during my hospitalization. The forensic accounting revealed that Ryan and Eric had transferred approximately $2.7 million in assets to entities they controlled, liquidated 2 profitable properties without authorization, and attempted to redirect ongoing revenue streams to their temporary company structure. They'd also begun negotiating the sale of our most valuable development project to a competitor, with the proceeds intended to fund their new venture. What made their actions particularly damaging was the breach of fiduciary duty. Eric, as my business partner and corporate officer, had a legal obligation to act in the company's best interests and to honor the governance structures we'd established. By participating in unauthorized asset transfers and supporting Ryan's power grab, he'd violated the most fundamental principles of business partnership. Ryan's actions were motivated by pure opportunism, but they were also legally problematic because he'd incorporated his LLC using inside information about our client base and ongoing projects. He'd essentially used proprietary company information to establish a competing business while I was incapacitated, then attempted to transfer our assets and relationships to that competing entity. On a Thursday morning in early May, 6 weeks after I'd been discharged from the hospital, a process server walked into the offices of Talbot and Green Holdings. Ryan and Eric were in the conference room with 3 potential clients, discussing a joint venture deal that would have been worth $1, $2 million in fees. The process server asked for Eric Green by name, handed him the legal papers, and walked out. Eric's face went white as he read the injunction. All company assets frozen pending investigation. All transfers made during my hospitalization declared void. All bank accounts locked except for payroll and essential operating expenses. Eric was named individually in the filing for breach of fiduciary duty and corporate fraud. Ryan was named for fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of assets. The potential clients looked around the conference room, asked a few polite questions about what was happening, and left. Word travels fast in Charlotte's commercial real estate community. By the end of the day, everyone in the business knew that Talbot and Green Holdings was under legal investigation for internal fraud. Ryan called me that evening. I almost didn't answer, but I was curious to hear what he had to say. "Greg," he said, and his voice was shaking. "We need to talk. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said calmly. "You said I wouldn't make it and you started transferring everything. I made it. Now you're facing the consequences." "I was trying to protect the business," he said. "I was trying to keep everything together for when you got better. By forging my signature? By incorporating a competing company? By telling clients I might die?" There was a long silence. Then Ryan said, "I'm your brother." "Yes," I said. "You are? And that makes what you did worse, not better." I hung up and turned off my phone. Eric tried a different approach. He came to my house the next morning, looking like he hadn't slept. "Greg," he said when I opened the door, "we built this company together. We've been partners for 15 years. Don't let a few bad decisions destroy everything we've worked for." "A few bad decisions?" I asked. "You attempted to liquidate $2.7 million in assets while I was in a coma. You forged my signature on legal documents. You violated your fiduciary duty and betrayed 15 years of trust. That's not a few bad decisions, Eric. That's systematic fraud." "I was panicked," he said. "The doctor said you might not wake up. I thought I was protecting our employees, our clients, our investments. Oh, by excluding me from decisions about my own company? By giving Ryan control over assets he had no legal right to manage? By lying to our staff about my authorization?" Eric stared at me for a long moment. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to resign," I said. "I want you to agree to a settlement that makes the company whole for the damages you caused, and I want you to understand that our partnership is over." He nodded slowly. "And Ryan?" "Ryan made his choice when he decided I wouldn't survive. Now he gets to live with the consequences." The legal proceedings took 3 months to resolve. Eric negotiated a settlement that required him to forfeit his 49% ownership stake in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution. He also agreed to pay $400,000 in restitution for the costs associated with unwinding the unauthorized transfers and restoring the company's financial position. He resigned quietly and moved to Atlanta, where he found work with a property management firm. Ryan fought the charges initially, claiming he'd been acting under Eric's direction and didn't understand the legal implications of his actions. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signatures, the unauthorized LLC, the client solicitation during my hospitalization. His attorney eventually negotiated a plea deal that included 6 months in county jail for perjury and fraud, plus 5 years of probation and a $50,000 fine. He was also banned from working in North Carolina's real estate industry for 10 years. The criminal proceedings generated some media attention, mostly because of the unusual circumstances. A local business journal ran a story titled "Trust and Betrayal: How One Charlotte Developer Protected His Legacy from Family Fraud." The article positioned me as an example of quiet resilience and smart business planning, someone who'd survived both a medical crisis and a corporate betrayal through preparation and legal protection. The industry response was overwhelmingly supportive, and it came from the highest levels of Charlotte's commercial real estate establishment. Charles Morrison, president of the Carolinas Commercial Real Estate Association, personally called to commend our corporate governance standards and invited me to serve on the association's ethics committee. 3 major institutional investors that had never worked with us previously reached out specifically because they'd been impressed by our integrity during the crisis and wanted to partner with a firm that had proven it would protect fiduciary interests even under extreme personal circumstances. We were selected as the exclusive development partner for 2 city-sponsored projects, specifically because the selection committee cited our demonstrated commitment to ethical business practices and transparent governance as deciding factors. The North Carolina Secretary of State's office even contacted us about potentially using our corporate governance framework as a model for recommended business practices in their small business development programs. Within 6 months, our enhanced reputation had generated over $12 million in new business opportunities, making the betrayal one of the most profitable disasters in our company's history. I spent the summer rebuilding the company as sole managing director. I promoted 2 of our senior associates to partnership positions, restructured our operations to be less dependent on any single individual, and implemented additional safeguards to prevent future internal fraud. The company emerged stronger and more profitable than before the crisis. By the end of the year, we'd completed the Eastwood Commons development successfully and won 2 major new projects based on our enhanced reputation for integrity and professionalism. Our private lending division expanded as clients specifically sought us out because of our proven commitment to fiduciary responsibility. The personal cost was harder to quantify, but no less real. I lost a brother and a longtime friend, but I gained something more valuable: the knowledge that I could protect what I'd built and survive even the most personal betrayals. The legal framework Monica had established didn't just save my business. It revealed the true character of people I'd trusted with my life's work. My relationship with my daughter Emily actually improved during this period. She was a senior at NC State, studying business herself, and she was fascinated by the corporate governance aspects of what had happened. We had long conversations about trust, loyalty, and the importance of legal protection in business relationships. She wrote her senior thesis on fiduciary duty and family businesses, using my case as a primary example. My mother, now 78 and living in an assisted care facility, took the news about Ryan hard, but not surprisingly. "I always knew that boy would break your heart someday," she said, "but I'm proud of how you handled it. You didn't let anger make you stupid." Coming from a woman who'd raised 2 boys alone after their father abandoned them, that meant everything. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs through the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, sharing lessons about business structure, asset protection, and the importance of trusting but verifying in all professional relationships. The phrase I found myself repeating most often was, "Trust isn't just about loyalty, it's about readiness." The mentoring work led to speaking opportunities at business schools and industry conferences. I developed a presentation called Building Bulletproof Businesses: Legal Protection in the Age of Opportunism that was popular with entrepreneurs and established business owners alike. The core message was simple: hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, because the people closest to you often have the most opportunity to cause damage. 2 years after the betrayal, I received a letter from Ryan. He was living in Asheville, working as a sales associate for a small residential real estate firm, trying to rebuild his life after serving his sentence. The letter was 3 pages of apology, regret, and requests for forgiveness. He acknowledged that his actions were inexcusable, that he'd betrayed not just me but our entire family legacy. He asked if there was any chance we could rebuild our relationship. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, not because of anger, but because of what they reveal about character. Ryan hadn't just stolen money or violated legal agreements. He'd written me off as dead while I was fighting for my life, then moved to profit from my demise. That's not a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. That's a fundamental failure of human decency. Eric sent holiday cards for a few years, generic business cards with no personal message. I heard through industry contacts that he was doing well in Atlanta, had remarried, and was working his way back up in the property management world. I felt no animosity toward him, but also no desire to reconnect. Some partnerships, once broken, can't be repaired. The business continued to grow and evolve. We developed a reputation as the most trustworthy commercial real estate firm in Charlotte, the company that other companies wanted to partner with because they knew we honored our commitments and protected our clients' interests as fiercely as our own. Our revenue doubled in the 3 years following the betrayal, and we expanded into new markets in Columbia and Raleigh. I remarried in 2026 to a woman named Catherine, who owned a successful marketing consultancy. We met at a Chamber of Commerce event, where I was speaking about business ethics. She was impressed not by my success, but by my resilience and the way I'd turned betrayal into strength. Our wedding was small, attended by family and friends who'd proven their loyalty during the crisis. Emily graduated from NC State and joined the company as a junior associate, bringing fresh perspectives and new energy to our operations. She was particularly interested in the technological aspects of asset protection and fraud prevention, implementing digital monitoring systems that made our old forensic accounting setup look primitive. Having her in the business felt like completion of a circle, like the legacy I'd fought to protect was finally secure. The most satisfying moment came in late 2026, when I was invited to speak at the North Carolina Real Estate Development Association's annual conference. The topic was Crisis Management and Corporate Governance, and I was introduced as a leader who'd successfully navigated both medical crisis and internal betrayal, while maintaining the highest standards of business integrity. Standing at that podium, looking out at an audience of peers and competitors who'd watched my company survive and thrive after what should have been a devastating blow, I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond financial success. I'd protected what I'd built, honored my commitments to employees and clients, and demonstrated that preparation and principle could overcome even the most personal betrayals. During the Q&A session, a young developer asked me what I'd learned from the experience. I learned that trust is a luxury successful people can't afford to give away carelessly, I said. I learned that the best revenge is building something so strong that betrayal only makes it stronger. And I learned that sometimes the best response to being undervalued is simply to prove your worth through excellence and let the results speak for themselves. The applause was warm and sustained, but what mattered more was the respect I saw in the faces of people who understood the challenges of building and protecting a business in a world where loyalty is rare and self-interest is common. 6 months later, I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell the story of business betrayal and recovery. I declined to participate, not out of bitterness or desire for privacy, but because the story had already been told through our success. The best narratives aren't the ones you tell about yourself. They're the ones you live through your actions and achievements. Today, Talbot Holdings, we dropped the green from the company name, employs 47 people and manages over $50 million in assets. We're recognized as one of Charlotte's most ethical and successful commercial real estate firms. Our corporate governance standards are studied by business schools, and our asset protection protocols are replicated by firms across the Southeast. I sleep well at night, not because I avoided betrayal, but because I survived it with my integrity intact. The legal protections Monica established saved my business, but the principles that guided my response saved something more important: my faith in the possibility of building something lasting and worthwhile in a world where opportunism often masquerades as friendship. Sometimes the best response to being written off is simply to keep writing your own story with excellence, dignity, and unshakable commitment to what's right. I hadn't sought revenge against Ryan and Eric. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking. Some protections are built before the storm. Others are built by surviving it.